Okay, so welcome back to World of Aerospace. I'm thrilled to be joined by a true pioneer in planetary science today, Dr. Pascal Lee. He's a planetary scientist with the SETI Institute. He's a co-founder of the Mars Institute, and he's the director of the Haughton-Mars Project, which is one of the most advanced Mars analog field research programs on Earth. Dr. Lee, thank you for joining me. Now, could you introduce yourself to the audience?
It's good to be with you, Vince. Thanks for having me. So I'm a planetary scientist. I, I, what can I say about myself? I was born in Hong Kong. I grew up in France. I came to America to go to graduate school. I went to Cornell, where I studied planetary science and astronomy. And after I graduated, I stayed in America. I went to work at NASA for a postdoc. And I started this project up in the Arctic called the Haughton-Mars Project. So Haughton-Mars Project is a field research project where every summer we travel, my teammates and I, to the Arctic. We go to this incredible place called Devon Island. It's the largest uninhabited island on Earth. It's very near the North Pole. It's about 1,000 miles from the North Pole, and it's an environment that's extremely cold and dry at the same time. So a little bit in the direction of what Mars is like.
Yeah.
And on Devon Island, there's a very large meteorite impact crater called Houghton Crater, hence the name of our project, Houghton-Mars Project. So we go up there every summer to do geology, biology, but also to test future systems and strategies for human exploration. So anyway, that's the main project I work on. Otherwise, I work on the moon, on Mars, on the evolution of water, especially on the moon and Mars, and also the search for life on Mars.
Okay, so Dr. Lee, so for the hot, let's go back to the Haughton Mars project. So I'm curious, how did this project get started and like what kind of sparked your mind to want to do it like on Devon Island? I know it's such a unique place, but what kind of pushed you to have to do this sort of project?
Yeah, well, when I've always been in love with space, of course, but also with the polar regions of the Earth. And when I was still in France before I came to America, I went to spend a year in Antarctica, and that's because France at the time still had a draft for young men, and so I had to do a year of national service, and instead of running around at a NATO base, I applied to go to Antarctica to be a scientist there. France had one position each year for one geologist to do to go to Antarctica and uh, study the geology of Antarctica. And so I was lucky I got picked. I spent an entire year, 402 days, I actually counted them, um, in Antarctica. And after that, it's after that that I came to grad school in America. So the point, though, is Antarctica was just an incredible life changing experience for me. And from that point on, I really believe that studying the Earth's polar regions and also working in the Earth's polar regions would really prepare people well for their journey to Mars. You could test things, you could learn how to do or optimize field research, exploration. You could uh, just learn how to do all kinds of things that you will have to do once you get to Mars, including setting up a base, for example, how
So
you set up a base, etc. Yeah.
yeah, so what's your long-term vision for the analog field research and the as part of the Hudson Mars project? Is it like about testing tech, or is it like preparing astronauts, or is it all of it? What would you say is like that long term?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think, Devon Island will remain forever from the standpoint of, for a long time, one of the best places and most Mars-like places on our planet. And I do think that humans will be going to Mars, in the near future, and that one of the best ways to prepare them to go is to come and learn how to do exploration in places like Devon Island. So I do see that our long-term future will be about astronaut training, um, but also about testing future technologies that will be useful for humans when they go explore not just Mars, the moon as well. The the moon has impact craters, for example, a lot of them, and Houghton crater is an impact crater, and so even studying um, or learning how to explore an impact crater and the scale of operations that are involved in that is involved in the exploration of craters on the moon, of large ones, is something you can learn on Devon Island. So it's an exceptional place, really. We call it Mars on Earth, but sometimes we call it Moon on Earth as well.
Mhm.
It's you know if I was ready to go to the moon or Mars, I would be glad that I have trained on Devon Island.
Yeah.
And I think for future people who are traveling to the moon and Mars, maybe you plan to go there someday. Uh, I I would urge you to come experience Devon Island and train there. I think you will be a
Okay.
better astronaut and a field explorer if you've done
Yeah.
that.
All right. So wait, can you describe what it's like working and living on Devon Island? So like what does like a day in the life look like during like whenever you're preparing there?
Yeah, so the key thing is that we go there every year, so we have a good reason to have set up a base. And in fact, it works both ways. Setting up a base has allowed us to actually return year after year, improve the facilities of the base, increase its capabilities. And even since my time in Antarctica, but now definitely with having set up a base on Devon Island for our project, I really think that that's the most important thing for humans to set up in the near term, in the short term, on the moon or on Mars once we get there. A base is really, not just a bunch of habitats or housing. It's a logistical hub, infrastructure, and a permanent shelter for you to have on a planet. If you are really intent on exploring the planet, having a base doesn't really tie you down to any one location. It might do that a little bit at first, but the key thing about a base is that you equip the base then with a very versatile mobility system, right? So if you look at bases in Antarctica, for example, sure there are some there's a fixed habitat infrastructure, but then there are vehicles, airplanes, helicopters, rovers, snowmobiles that allow you to roam all the way out to the entire continent. And so similarly, having that on Devon Island allows us to roam around on Devon Island, which is, like I said, the largest uninhabited island on Earth. So it's about the size of West Virginia or the country of Croatia. So, it's pretty big. And the
Big.
thing about Devon Island, of course, is that because it's uninhabited, there are no picket fences, no property boundaries per se, no, and you have this vast rocky desert landscape with canyons and unbelievable scenery that really takes you to Mars, and gets you ready for the journey.
Yeah, so what are some specific examples of like the most important technologies that has been tested on Devon Island?
Well, one of the key, I mean, there's been many. We've tested, robotic rovers, drills, robotic arms. We've tested, I'm looking at robotic stuff first. Then we've tested robotic airplanes, flyers for Mars, drones. We've tested a lot of spacesuits. Let me talk to you about the spacesuits in particular, because most people often say, well, we are ready to go to Mars. It's just a matter of political will. But the truth is, there's a huge challenge in going to Mars, in particular in one area of technology, which is the spacesuit. I mean, there are many other challenges, of course, with the rocketry, the life support, but the spacesuit is often under appreciated as a challenge. Right now, the spacesuit that we have weighs about 300 pounds on Earth. So, of course, that's impossible to really walk around with. It'd be extremely heavy on your back. But thankfully, we don't wear our spacesuits on Earth. We wear them in low Earth orbit, in zero G, or we take them to the moon. So, a 300-pound spacesuit, once you are in zero G, no longer has 300 pound of weight. It just has this mass of 300 pounds. So it has the inertia of in other words, the bulk of a 300-pound suit, but it doesn't have the weight of a 300-pound suit. If you take that spacesuit to the moon, where gravity is 6 times less than on the Earth, the felt weight of the spacesuit on your back is 300 pounds divided by 6. So that's 50 pounds. 50 pounds carrying something that weighs 50 pounds on your back. If you are a high school student, you can already do that. So it's heavy. It's like a heavy camping backpack, but it's something that you can wear, walk around with, and do exploration with. And sure enough, the Apollo astronauts did a great job at doing that. But if you were to take that same spacesuit to Mars, where gravity is not 6 times less, in other words, not 17% of the gravity on Earth, but 38% of the gravity on Earth, the 300-pound spacesuit would have a felt weight on Mars of 125 pounds approximately. So you would still be unable to really be an effective explorer working and wearing, the state-of-the-art spacesuit that we have on the Earth. You have to really cut down the mass of the spacesuit in half. And if you brought the mass of the spacesuit down in half, so that instead of 300 pounds on Earth, it weighed only 150 pounds on the Earth. Then when you take it to Mars, 38% of 125 pounds would be roughly 60 pounds. So then you have a spacesuit that's wearable. Well, if you think about it, to cut the mass of a 300-pound spacesuit in half, to bring it down to 150 pounds is not easy. I mean, a spacesuit is already lean and mean. It's obviously not just clothing; it's a wearable spacecraft, and it has life support systems. It has to hold pressure. It has to have waste disposal. It has to remove carbon dioxide, which you exhale. It has to have computers on board, communication system. It's an entire spacecraft. When you're designing a spacesuit, you are not just a human physiology engineer. You are also an aerospace engineer. In fact, you're above all an aerospace engineer. So there's a lot of work still to be done on the spacesuit. And on Devon Island, we've been working for the past 20 years or so, actually, with the current spacesuit manufacturer of the space shuttle and space station suit. Used to be a company called Hamilton Sundstrand. They actually build the Apollo spacesuits as well. So they have a long heritage of working on suits. This company is now called Collins Aerospace, and so we've been working with Collins Aerospace to figure out how to design the Mars spacesuit of the future. And the Mars spacesuit of the future is something that will be something really interesting. We figured that the best way to do this is to not just think of the exploration unit as the human plus the spacesuit, but to think of the exploration unit as the human plus the spacesuit plus an ATV, a vehicle that you ride around. It's your personal Mars quad bike. An ATV is often called a four-wheeler. So something small and nimble that is allowing you to basically ride around. And what you do is you offload some of the most heavy elements of your spacesuit, say the oxygen tanks, the water tanks, the batteries. Those are the three most heavy things in the back of your backpack. In your backpack, you keep some, of course, inside your spacesuit, but you offload uh, part of them, the big parts of them, onto your ATV. So when you're riding your ATV, you're wearing a spacesuit, you're outdoors doing, a spacewalk on Mars, but you're riding your bike instead of just simply walking. And while you're riding your bike, you're plugged into your ATV's heavy oxygen tanks, heavy batteries, and heavy water tanks. And that way, your bike is doing the effort of lugging all those things around. You yourself, you're just wearing a small, nimble spacesuit. And then once you stop somewhere and you want to say step off of your ATV to go pick up some rocks or look at the geology, you can do that. You just unplug the oxygen, water, and batteries, and you walk off. And when you're walking off, now you're wearing a very lightweight spacesuit, which is what you really want to be able to walk around on Mars. But of course, it's carrying less oxygen, less batteries, and less water than our normal spacesuit, so to speak. And however, it's light enough for you to walk around and do work. But of course, the trick is because now you have less autonomy with your spacesuit. You don't have as much supplies in your backpack. Um, and meanwhile, you want to stay safe. Your ATV is a robotic ATV. It follows you. So it's a bit like a well-trained dog and never leaves you for any great distance. And um, therefore, if you need to hop back on the vehicle for resupplies, you just turn around and it's right there, and you jump back on and you off you go. If It's also self-driving, which is of course not a difficult thing to do these days. We already have cars and even suitcases in airports that follow you, that are self-rolling. So we know how to do that. So the bottom line is this vision that we have for humans exploring Mars. You were asking, what's one of the technologies we've worked out for humans on Mars in the future? Well, I would say that would be it. That's the spacesuit for Mars, which is actually a spacesuit rover combo.
Yeah, okay, so that's quite a lot. So I know there's been a lot of technology, not just that's been tested in Devon Island, but has there been a moment like maybe like a failure or something that like kind of shook you that stood out like as a turning point in like some of the work that's been done on Devon Island?
Well, um, when when you're working on Devon Island, the purpose is to conduct a test, right? Or to develop a new technology. So the purpose is actually to run into failures. You actually feel that when you encounter a failure in testing a system, sure, your ego might be bruised momentarily because you thought this would work and it doesn't. But the truth is that's exactly what you want to experience, because that's why you're doing the test. You're doing the test because you weren't 100% sure that it was going to work as planned, and you actually want to make sure that it does. So when you encounter a problem during a test, when you encounter a problem in reality, it's a problem. When you encounter a problem in a test, it's actually a good thing. As a rigorous engineer or scientist who's testing a hypothesis or design, uh, you know, the testing phase is measured by how many failures you fix and eventually work out. So I actually think that if you're an engineer, you design something and you do not encounter a failure, that's often a bit worrisome because you might have gotten it right from the get-go, but it could also mean that you know there's something hiding in there that hasn't showed up yet as a problem, and that the day it will show up will be when you're actually in flight. So um, yeah, so the whole point of doing engineering tests and systems development in a place that's as rough and extreme as Devon Island is to run into problems. I mean, another good example is the work that NASA has been doing developing a drill to go into very rough frozen ground on Devon Island. The idea is to have this drill then be flown to the moon, to the polar regions where there's ice in the ground, or to Mars where there are plenty of places with ice in the ground, and to be able to drill, to get access to that water in the subsurface, to sample it, to measure its whether or not it has life in it, for example. And so designing a drill that will work on these very extreme conditions of frozen ground is doesn't sound like a big deal here, but it's actually a huge challenge. Ice does not like to be drilled into. I don't know if you've ever tried, and don't try this at home because it's not a, you could hurt yourself, but if you use a drill to drill into a block of ice, you'll realize that it's not as easy as one might think if the block of ice is very cold. Okay, so my point about this is drilling technologies have, for example, been tested there, and especially software to make the drill work on its own. But that's the other thing, so you're designing software to make a drill into very tough terrain. Um, Guess what's going to happen? Software has bugs. It will have to be improved on, iterated on. So but ultimately NASA was able to fly that drill that we tested on Devon Island. I mean, not the actual drill, hardware itself, but the software on some recent moon missions, and they've been working well.
Okay, so speaking of the moon, do you believe that we need to go to like experience going to the moon and like practice habitation on the moon before we start going on to Mars? Do you think the moon plays a vital role in that, like similar to the things that Artemis is doing with settling on the moon? Or do you think we can go kind of straight into habitation on the Mars?
Well, I think we can go into straight habitation on to Mars, but we are better off by testing things ahead of time and learning how to make, maybe somewhat more forgivable mistakes on the moon. Um, a lot of these things work well, not just when they are working, they work well when they are optimized.
Yeah.
And optimization is something that takes time and iteration and experience. So, we could design a habitat today for Mars that would probably work well. But to make it sort of a well-designed habitat that will work well for many years into the future and be optimized for our activities, that's something that we might want to test out a few times on the moon, improve on. Same thing with vehicles, same thing with spacesuits. So when you add it all up, the moon is not so much as a necessary step from an engineering standpoint. I'm talking about here. Okay, it's not like it's a necessary step. If we did not have a moon, would that mean that we would never go to Mars? So I don't think that's the case. I think that if we didn't have a moon, we would go to Mars someday, and just learn the hard way. But having the moon is an opportunity to make some mistakes closer to home, or at least to learn how to do things closer to home, and to iterate a little bit. But that's not even the reason why we must go back to the moon. We must go back to the moon because there are strategic reasons for any nation or space power to want to be in locations where our competition is present or going. So in the United States today, the competition is perceived to be China and the Soviet Union, and China and Soviet Union are buddying up to go to the moon together. So the United States can't just focus on going to Mars while leaving its competitors, China and Russia, starting to occupy the moon and doing stuff with astronauts on the moon, which is so close to Earth and therefore strategic. We see this as this is not a very, this might not come across as sort of a very noble or sort of humanitarian or a big vision for humans going to space to worry about what your competing countries are doing. But at the same time, these competitions are promoters of fast progress in technology and advancement. I mean, if we did not have the threat of the Soviet Union in the past, the United States might not have made that big push to go to the moon with Apollo. And Apollo was not just a big success at the time. It's a success that we've been riding on, and that has been helping our society tremendously since. One of the things that's, I mean, one of the big successes of Apollo, of course, was that the United States beat the Soviet Union at doing something big in space. Um, Remember that the Soviet Union was ahead in the sense that they had many firsts that they had, checked, boxes that they had checked in going to space. They had sent the first satellite in space, the first living being, the dog Laika, the first man or human in space, Yuri Gagarin, the first woman in space, Valentina Tereshkova, the first spacewalk with Alexei Leonov, the first rendezvous of two spacecraft in space. They were ahead of the US, at least in terms of these media announcements, for quite a while there at the beginning of the space race. And the United States really had to respond by saying, let's show them what we can do. So President Kennedy essentially asked, what can we do in space that would allow us to catch up and beat the Soviet Union at? And the answer, Mr. President, is to put a man on the moon and to return him safely to the Earth before the end of the decade. So going to the moon in the 60s had nothing to do with science or exploration even. It had to do with beating our competition, to demonstrate that we had a way of life that was capable of incredible stuff. So, just to wrap up on this point, um, uh, obviously we managed to go to the moon before the end of the decade, and the Soviet Union didn't manage to do that. So from then on, the United States has been recognized as being far ahead of the Soviet Union in terms of technology and space capability. Um, the second big benefit, of course, of going to the moon was during Apollo was lunar science, but that's a byproduct of the race. It's not the reason why we went to the moon. And the third big benefit that we have on the moon was the fact that at the time of Apollo, there was a doubling in the number of young people across the country who wanted to go into STEM fields, STEM studies, engineering, science. And this really created a very solid foundation for the nation in the generation afterwards, who were essentially oriented into technology. I mean, I would argue that it's not a coincidence that the tech giants of the modern era are people who are space cadets. They were interested in the space program. They were inspired by Apollo. They went into these space fields because they were so excited by the prospect of us exploring space. So that's something not to be neglected. And I think doing something like going to Mars would have the same thing. It would have the same effect. It would generate a lot of excitement among the young generation of people in schools, like yourself, for example. And you're already attracted to a STEM field, I'm sure. But I mean, aerospace engineering. But let's say you were not. Going to Mars would be such an exciting thing that many people would go into science and technology, which would be a good thing for the nation in a broader sense. So even though it would be an expensive thing to do, it's a bit like college. It's expensive, but you still go put yourself through college because it's a big investment in your future, and it makes you more capable as a human being to compete in the future. So it's in that sense that I find that the cost and challenge of going to Mars or returning to the moon are really worth it. Is because sure, it's expensive. Let's not kid ourselves, but can you really afford to just allow other people to go to college and not yourself, if you could, and um, and just hope that you will get a good job at the end? Well, it's a big risk, right? So if you can afford to go, you should really go. And I think we can afford to go, and we must lead. So that's sort of you know I think what's at stake here. And going back to the current competition with Russia and China, we couldn't possibly just be going to the moon directly and sorry, going to Mars directly and ignoring the moon.
Okay, that's awesome, Dr. Lee. So thank you for telling us about the Haughton-Mars project and just sharing your advice and your journey. So where can some of our listeners that are super interested in your work like follow keep following it or even learn more about what you're doing?
Well, I, I, okay, I post some of my work on Twitter. My Twitter handle is at Pascal Lee Tweets. So that's where I, publicize a lot of my work. I'm also on LinkedIn. So if you are a student or in industry, you should, connect with me on LinkedIn. It's Pascal Lee. I guess you can find me that way. Um, if you want to follow our activities in the Arctic, etc., then you should probably check out our website. Um, it's marsinstitute.no/HMP, HMP for the Haughton-Mars Project. Once again, it's marsinstitute.no/HMP. And then you can just email me as well. You can email me at pascal.lee@marsinstitute.net. Don't hesitate to send me an email. Tell me what you do, who you are, and I actually have internships that I work on with students, including senior high school students, preparing them to go to college, and of course, many college students as well, especially juniors and seniors in college, and also graduate students. So, uh, among all your listeners, if you guys are interested in working on some project, possibly even going to the Arctic someday, we can just connect with me and we can discuss it.